Hi everyone and welcome back. My DAC reviewing spree continues, and today I'll be checking out this fellow right here. This is the SMSL Raw Pro DAC1 that goes for $699. This is their third unit in the Raw lineup. They started with the Raw MDA1 at 279 that uses low voltage DAC chips. Then they released a much beefier, much nicer Raw DAC1 that uses proper flagship grade AKM silicon, and now they have the biggest unit in their Raw lineup that swapped those AKM silicon with flagship grade ESS-able silicon. We have a much nicer clocking system and a much nicer power supply implementation, and I'm pretty sure all of those changes will have something to say when music will start kicking my eardrums. I'll be comparing this one with the topping D90 Discrete and also with the topping Centaurus, so let's check it out. Although I cannot fault much this unit when it comes to build quality, because we have a fully CNC machined unit, we have a tempered glass display, we have metallic feet with rubber inlay, so all of the signs that we're dealing with a high quality unit. I don't particularly enjoy almost every SMSL design choice, maybe except for the SU10 that looked symmetrical and made sense to me. SMSL is constantly changing the shape and the size of their units. The displays are always going to the right, to the left, and sometimes are staying in the middle. And personally, I think this is a mistake, because you cannot build a strong brand identity if you are constantly changing the shape of your devices. I think there should be an order and a meaning, but sadly that is rarely the case with SMSL. But again, I'm reminding you that this is only about the looks of their devices, not about the build quality, which I believe is great at this price point. When it comes to controls, we have pretty much every digital input except for BNC. There's even a USB Type-C input that works flawlessly with modern smartphones, and we also have an I2S input, which is always desirable since the I2S connection bypasses several chips on the motherboard and therefore sounds a bit clearer and more transparent. The RCA and XLR outputs are fixed or variable, and yes, it can work as a DAC and as a passive preamp if you please. Although I've seen lots of SMSL user interfaces, this one feels like a breath of fresh air. It's a bit more polished and complete, and it also feels easier to understand. Besides selecting a desirable input and output, you can also choose a PCME filter or turn it off completely, and there are several sound color options as well, but I must admit that there is barely a sound difference, and that's why I used it mostly in the standard mode. You can enable or disable the volume control, but remember to set the volume at 0 dB before disabling the volume output, otherwise you'll be sending a weaker signal to your amplifier and limit its dynamic range. We have two user interface styles, and I think both are looking great. And there are even 4 languages on board, something that I don't remember seeing on SMSL DACs before. Under its hood, things are looking exactly as I have envisioned, and I'm a little sad that SMSL is not trying some new stuff, maybe developing their own single bit DAC, or maybe trying some, a beefier output stage, for example. So on the inside it looks very similar to their D400ES and even compared to SUX, which is more expensive, with the exception that we have just a single flagship ESS 9039 Pro DAC chip as opposed to 2 units on the SUX. Its digital inputs are handled by the same 3rd generation XMOS chip. We have 3 aquasilicon femtosecond clocks, 2 used for multiple or 44.1 and 48 kHz sample rates, and 1 used for DSD material, which I believe is a great choice in my opinion. We have basically the same Bluetooth receiver that supports all of those fancy aptX and LDAC codecs, but In the usual fashion, I do not recommend using Bluetooth because you'll be limiting its performance quite a lot, so use all those wired connections, those will sound considerably better. For some unknown reasons to me, we still have that MQA processing on board. As far as I know, Tidal moved to FLAC files, but maybe they are still offering a few albums in MQA, so I'm not really sure, but we still have that MQA decoder on board. The power supply seems beefier on the RAW Pro DAC1 compared to any of their RAW DACs made before. We have two switching mode power supplies, and of course, that automatically means that we have a beefier voltage regulation stage as well. Overall, I would say that this is your standard ESS Sabre DAC that SMSL Audio is trying to reinvent, having just a different case and a slightly different UI, but I'd say that this is a very similar unit to what they did before. I have a couple of things to say about its UI that will improve your listening experience, and I have one single con to say about its UI, and let's start with that one. If you disable the PCM filter and then engage a sound color option, then without a single warning you'll get a highly distorted sound, and nothing seems to solve this issue. I tried updating the firmware, I tried formatting it to factory settings, but the same story repeats, so please be extra careful when playing with those sound color options, as you will need to engage a PCM filter as well for them to work. It doesn't matter which one, but one PCM filter needs to be selected. Now to the good parts. I observed that once you select plus 2 dB on its analog output and then lock the volume, then it will provide a slightly higher voltage output and therefore will sound a bit snappier and just a bit more dynamic compared to the standard 0 dB setting. Plus 2 dB is a safe setting and will not overload any amplifier that I know of, so don't worry about clipping, that will not happen with this setting. You can try this little trick and it will make it a bit more fun sounding. And the last hack I recommend is the selection of a slightly lower DPLL setting. That will force the clocks to filter additional noise. In my case, DPLL 2 or 3 sounds a bit more precise than the standard 5, and if you have a low latency digital source, you can try lowering the setting for a slightly clearer sound output. If the sound gets distorted or laggy at DPLL 1 or 2, then simply raise this setting by one level until everything plays nicely and you'll get a slight boost in clarity. Alright everyone, let's address the most important question. How does it sound? But before I tell you a good deal about its sound, I just want to mention that for about 2 days I'm comparing this one with the topping D90 Discrete and also with the Centaurus DAC. And although there are differences, price differences between the D90 Discrete and the RAW Pro DAC1, the sound performance is actually very similar, and if you checked already my D90 Discrete video, then this one will feel very similar. Also, if you checked my SMSL SUX and SU10 videos, then again this one sounds very similar, but of course there are several differences which I'll mention in a second. When you combine 3 individual femtosecond clocks, 2 used for PCB material and 1 used for DSD material, and you control all of that with a custom DSP, and also you have that flagship grade ESS Sabre silicon, that automatically means that I'm dealing with a highly resolving sounding unit. And I know you can go a little bit higher, like Gustard X30 for example, or Cordave, but those are considerably more expensive. But at $700 I believe this one plays almost or on the same level with something like SMSL SUX, SU10, topping D90 Discrete. It's exactly as resolving, and I believe this is the most important skill a DAC should have, and the RAW Pro DAC1 is already doing a great job in this regard. I was listening to Corvus Corax Sverker, and besides being bombarded by these absurd levels of nuances, I couldn't overlook the oomph and the slight mid-bass emphasis that added a bit of fullness into the mix. Even if we don't have a linear transformer on board, the RAW Pro DAC1 could still pressurize this room pretty strong with lots of sounds. The sound of the North felt powerful, and the voices of these warriors echoed a little bit longer, and I had a slightly longer decay of their voices, of the vocal cords. So I know that a few people are associating, affordable ESSibre DACs with a thin sound, with a lightweight sound, and maybe its smaller and more affordable siblings are sounding lighter weight and a little bit thinner. Maybe, I don't know, but this one is definitely not like that, and it's definitely boosting a little bit the mid-bass region, adds a little bit of oomph and substance to the point of calling it punchy and dynamic. I want to highlight these 2 points which I believe are quite impressive on today's unit. The first point is the transparency and the resolution of this unit, which I believe are quite high. The second point would be the transit response, the speed of the sound, again, to the point of calling this one quite raw and mean sounding. And I'm not really sure if SMSL Audio wanted to insinuate something with this product name, Raw Pro DAC1, but it's definitely rawer sounding compared to a more refined sounding Centaurus DAC by Topping. I know that many of you still value a speedy performance, an instant kick into the chest, and long bass sustain and a gentle decay of the notes. And although I didn't experience a very long bass sustain or a gentle decay of the notes, this is indeed a lightning fast sounding unit that does justice to modern tunes. Later on, I engaged listening to my headphones, so I connected this one to a Awun S70 Pro Evo, a very good headphone amplifier, a review that I'll be dropping in about a week, maybe 2. And I started listening to some desktop sensitive headphones that I own, and also to several ultra sensitive IAMs. That amplifier is completely dead silent, so if the noise floor will be higher, it means that everything is coming from the DAC, not from the amplifier. Luckily, no matter how hard I was going on the volume, the noise floor was nowhere to be found, so this is a very clean sounding unit. The background is always very dark, and the noise floor, I simply couldn't detect it at any level. So yes, this is a very clean sounding unit in this regard. Sirius by Alan Parsons Project is an incredibly dynamic track with an absolute darkness in between the notes. I pushed the volume as high as I could, but again my IAMs were silent, clear and detailed sounding. The frequency response seems quite linear. It's well extended down low in the sub bass and also in the top octave, so prepare to hear and to feel the might of the sub bass and also all of the energy in the top octave. I won't say this is a bright sounding DAC, but it's definitely roughless and it will expose every flaw in the recordings that you're listening to. If you want to hear all and everything, this becomes an easy recommendation, especially at this price. There is, however, one thing that I would never do on this one, and that would be connecting an ultra-linear sounding amplifier or preamplifier. For example, I still have around that SMSL SHX headphone amplifier and preamplifier, and when combining that one with this DAC, the sound becomes clinical to the point of becoming even bright sounding and bothering long term, so I would not use that one. I would, however, use amplifier that boosts the color, that adds more texture, that adds more weight to the sound, so that would be a Class A amplifier, a fully discrete amplifier, maybe a tube amplifier. So that Awun S70 Pro Evo worked absolutely outstanding with this one. And there are many examples that I would give, but definitely an amplifier that has some character, that boosts the color, that adds some sweetness, some weight, and so on and so forth. Okay guys, so let's compare the sound of the SMSL Raw Pro DAC1 with the Topping Centaurus and also with the D90 Discrete. The funny thing is that comparing it with the Centaurus is so incredibly simple because they are sounding so different, and yet it's so complicated comparing it with the D90 Discrete because they are sounding very similar. Even in a blind test, you'll have hard time telling which is which. So I started comparing it with the D90 Discrete first. I needed to do some volume matching because one is providing 5.2 volts, one is providing 5 volts, so there's one click difference on my amplifier to have the same SPL. They have pretty much the same resolution, the same transparency, the same speed, the same transit response. The only differences that I could tell is that D90 Discrete is binding the notes nicer, It adds a little bit of liquidity, so it works nicer even with lo-fi and with bad mastered music. Something that sounded a bit raw and unpolished on the SMSL. At the same time, this one was adding a little bit of oomph in the mid bass. The sound was a little bit punchier, more muscular. Dynamics were a little bit better, so if you want nicer dynamics and a nicer kick, I believe this one is doing better compared to all of these. I could fully relax my brain and listen to basically everything with the topping D90 Discrete, but I needed to readjust a little bit my brain when listening to the SMSL, and definitely it didn't work that great with bad mastered music or with some, raw metal tunes, rock music, with some old music that has plenty of, hisses or a higher treble output. That didn't work that great on the SMSL. The drawbacks of the SMSL being rawer and meaner sounding can also be a plus for some listeners, because it definitely adds a bit more energy in the mid bass, and the music is simply a little bit more physical, punchier sounding, and for a certain listener, music lover, this can be a plus. Comparing it with the Centaurus DAC, it's like comparing apples with oranges. One is mean, it's untamed, it's raw, unpolished, but also very dynamic and clean sounding. And other is gentle, is soft, is pressing the brakes in terms of transients, it's rounding the frequency extremes, the sub bass and the upper treble. Is gentle sounding, it's boosting a little bit the color and also the texture of the music. So these two are actually quite opposite sounding, in my opinion. I believe Centaurus is for the music lover in you, and I believe the SMSL is for the audiophile in you. This one is definitely has more hi-fi qualities. I mean, resolution, speed, transparency, so the most important things a DAC should have and should do. The SMSL has those traits and spades, but at the same time, Centaurus is not so impressive in this regard. It's not so technical, but it will relax you fully, and it works with a wider selection of music. And a music lover, I believe, will appreciate the Centaurus DAC a little bit more. One last thing that I want to say is that while the SMSL is more affordable, it will still provide a higher dynamic range and more macro detail information, things that will be missing on the Centaurus. Nonetheless, I still see lots of potential with the SMSL. Just pair it with a high bias Class A or Class AB amplifier, and suddenly the sound is no longer raw or unpolished. Wrapping up at $699, I believe this unit has a lot to offer. We have some PCME digital filters, we have sound color options that will marginally change the sound according to your preference. We have almost every single digital input. We have a noiseless performance, even going super loud, even with ultra-sensitive IAMs. And we have a highly transparent and very resolving sound. At the end of the day, I believe that dynamic range and resolution are the most important skills a DAC should have, and this one provides that in spades. I still dislike yet another case for SMSL, and I also don't like the fact that if I disable a PCME digital filter and enable a sound color option, the sound gets distorted, but this can be solved via a firmware update, and if your name is SMSL, you know what to do. Alright guys, this is pretty much it. Thanks for watching. My name is Sando. Keep rocking, and I'll see you very soon.